Hello, my name is Teach, and I'm the executive producer and usually the GM of games here at Rabbit Haberdashery. We're a group of gamers that use our gaming to raise money for Children's Miracle Network hospitals. Every year, we have a 24-hour gaming event, but throughout the year, we fundraise as well. And so, in that time, I've had many opportunities to teach people how to play tabletop RPGs. And most of the resources or starter games that I've come across or that people have shared with me have assumed a certain baseline of knowledge about expectations, about how to play, about genre conventions, and so on. But it's very hard to get a handle on how to play these games if you don't have a baseline understanding or know where to find crucial information. And so I'm making this video all about the basics. Essentially, we're just going to dive into the most essential things that you need to know as you're getting into TTRPGs. And so today, for this first episode, we're going to introduce one topic and dive a bit more fully into a second. That first topic is what are TTRPGs? And the one that we're going to dive a bit more into is what expectations should I have of myself and others in playing it? And later videos will get into topics like finding the right game and parsing rules and performing checks and understanding terminology and things like that. And if you have specific questions, you should drop a comment below, or you should stick around at the end for info on some hands-on teaching that I'm running through Start Playing. But in the meantime, let's get started on this week's episode. Whose role is it anyway? So, what are TTRPGs? So, the situation, maybe your friend has invited you to join a campaign, or you saw a TikTok from Legends of Evantris and wanted to try that sort of thing for yourself, or you just got really into Stranger Things and you have questions about that. Some people will not like this definition. I'm going to use it anyway. Give me a minute to explain it, right? Essentially, a tabletop RPG it's like a life sim done on paper. Now, usually it's a life that's way more full of adventure and intrigue than your daily life is, but some games aim for the mundane, and some of you live bonkers lives. I'm not judging. Who hasn't jumped off a building they weren't supposed to? Don't answer that. If you're new to the hobby, the game you're going to start with will almost certainly have the following things. It's going to have a group of players working together. It's going to have a game master of some sort. It's either going to have magic or advanced technology, sometimes both. It's going to have a system of rolling dice to determine if your actions actually succeed. And it's going to have some means of having your character grow in strength as the game progresses. Now, there are games that are missing some or all of these elements, but you kind of have to know that they exist. You kind of have to go looking for them. So we won't cover them until later in this series. Like if you're getting invited to a game for the first time, it's probably going to have these elements because this list is going to cover things like Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Starfinder, Shadowrun, Mutants and Masterminds, Vampire the Masquerade, Daggerheart, Scion. All these games, all these World of Darkness and all that stuff, all these games are going to have these elements. Now, in these games, you create or adopt a character using a set of rules, and then that character joins a group of other characters that are created or adopted by the other players. And the game master presents your group with challenges and opportunities, and you use the knowledge that you have about your character's personality, skills, and abilities to decide what they will do in response to these situations. You roll dice and add any relevant modifiers to find out if your action succeeds, or maybe how it succeeds in some cases. The game master presents consequences of your actions, which will often result in new challenges or opportunities, and occasionally you will have the chance to increase the skills or abilities of your character so that you can increase your options and you can increase your odds of success. And we'll break down each of these ideas in more detail in later videos. But for now, it's enough to know that this is the general game loop. This is the expectation that you should have for what a game in general is usually going to be, at least in most of these games that we're talking about today. But you'll notice that there isn't an inherent win condition. Some campaigns do have a set objective, and you may consider it a victory to achieve that objective, and you will win at individual scenarios such as fights and social engagements, but TTRPGs are designed to kind of be ongoing whether you continue playing them or not. That is, you are telling a story within one period of a character's life, and it is assumed that they will have a past, and, if you're lucky, they will also have a future that falls outside the scope of the game. So you don't really win so much as tell this part of their story. And this is what I mean when I describe it as a life sim. You are simulating what this character's life choices would be within a set window of their life in response to stimuli that you can influence, but you do not control. Which brings us to our primary topic of this video, which is expectations. So what should I expect? If you're getting into this game for the first time, if you're getting into TTRPGs, you want to know what you're getting into, what you should expect from other people, and what other people should expect from you. And there's this controversial term in the hobby that I kind of need to explain because I think that it covers a lot of this, but we really have to understand what it means and why it's controversial. And that term is collective storytelling. Now, this term has taken on a life of its own. It seems to be commonly associated these days with a style of play where the rules of the actual system are seen as secondary, or rather, they are treated as subject to the story the party wants to tell, rather than as the framework that is in place to guide the story. Now, whether or not this is a fair assessment of the term's actual modern usage, that's debatable. But I will say that the term has arisen multiple times from multiple sources, and they didn't all use it that way, and they don't still now. I know this because I was one of the independent sources. I never heard the term before I started using it to describe my outlook on TTRPGs nearly 25 years ago, and I wasn't part of any larger kind of national gaming communities where I would have picked it up. But I also know that figures like Brennan Lee Mulligan did not get the term from me. Like, we don't cross over at all. I didn't influence him, and wherever he got the term didn't influence me. So this term has arisen multiple times, and it has meant slightly different things in these times. What I mean when I use the term is this: there is no main character. There is no one person singularly responsible for the experience or the outcome, and the objective of a campaign is a social act of crafting a story within a structured context. Essentially, the closest relative of TTRPGs is a debated thing. People talk about it as though it's like board games but this, it's like video games but this, or it's like writing a novel, which is how I got into it. I was writing and I wanted to have a better sense on how to deal with characters, and so I got into gaming and then found that it was a fun hobby on its own. But I think that all of those things kind of fall away a little bit behind something else. There is a much closer relative to tabletop RPGs, and that relative is actually fan fiction. Because what it is you are handed a world with rules and structures and characters that already exist in it. And you have free reign to decide how you will have your character interact with those rules and structures. But those structures do already exist. And you are defining how you're going to operate within this world that you've been handed. Now, this means two things. First, it means that you should generally choose games that do what you actually want them to do. See, there's a lot of people online right now that will tell you that Dungeons and Dragons can accommodate any style of play or any genre of story, and that you never need any other game. I would argue that those people are wrong. That is, the core mechanics of the D20 system, sure, you can apply that to a much wider range of games than D&D. And you see that a lot. You can find various games online, like there's a Star Wars 5e and a Mass Effect 5e and things like this, where they take that basic D20 system and they use it in different games and different genres. But Dungeons and Dragons itself has structures and design choices baked into it that are specific to it. And there are things that you cannot do without violating, changing, or ignoring those. Now, you have the option to do that, of course. I will not come to your house and stop you. And Wizards of the Coast very rarely hires Pinkertons to terrorize their customers. But it is very akin to demanding that you be allowed to play using Monopoly's rules on the board for the game of life. It's not going to work without significant changes. But if you insist on doing it, you will do it better if you are honest about what you're doing, instead of just claiming that life was always meant to accommodate that style of play. There are hundreds of thousands of games out there. I can promise you that whatever experience you're looking for exists, and you will find it if you allow yourself to go looking. I have just a partial stack right here of games that I own. There's sci-fi games like Starfinder. This game, Sigil and Shadow, runs off of percentage dice. We played FOSSA Star Trek on the channel that ran off of percentage dice as well. Old Gods of Appalachia, this is a podcast, a horror podcast that has its own game. Cowboy Bebop, you want to play in an anime universe? They have games for that. And Nobilis is a diceless system. You don't even have dice in that one. There are games out there where you don't have GMs, where you don't even have other players. where it's a solo RPG. The point is, whatever it is that you are looking to change, someone has already made a system that works that way. And so if you allow yourself to go digging into it, you will find games that do that. Secondly, it means that the scope of your choices will be impacted by the setting. Some things simply will not be possible. For instance, you cannot play a half demon in Shadowrun because they don't exist in that setting. They're not an option. Some things may be possible but have significant consequences, and you can't just bypass that cost. You will have to decide in game if that cost is worth it to you. And you will have some options that seem unrealistic or unbalanced. And demanding that they be made more realistic may actually hinder the game itself. Dungeons and Dragons famously has a lot of games or a lot of spells where you charm somebody and you seem to override their free will. And this raises a lot of questions about the nature of free will in that world. But if you bog the game down with demanding those spells not exist, or that debate actually be carried out in game, you might derail the entire game, and it breaks down a lot of just kind of how the game is designed to work. But that brings us to our second expectation and the last bit of this video, which is that everyone at the table has some responsibility to make the game work. See, there are a lot of moving parts to make a game session and a longer campaign work for the people involved. Let's visualize this with a scale. So, when you're playing, the responsibilities that make a game successful as a game, as a social gathering, and as a story all fit somewhere on this scale. Now, there are some things that are purely the responsibility of players, and there are some things that are purely the responsibility of the game master. Details will vary by system, but usually things that fall into the game master territory include things like playing antagonists, presenting the party with challenges, distributing or describing results of player character decisions, whether that's positive or negative, and moderating rules. The things that tend to fall into the player based territory include making decisions on behalf of your own characters, understanding your character's sheet, communicating limits and goals, and managing your character's resources. Note that what sits here are things that directly relate to your character. If you're playing D&D and your character is a ranger, knowledge of how sorcerers work falls outside of this kind of base expectation. If your character is built around doing a lot of grappling, you should learn the rules for grappling, or at least have those rules readily accessible at all times during game, but you probably don't need to think much about the rules around long-range weapon attacks. When you play your first session in a new system, you are probably only going to be handling this stuff, this very basic, fundamental stuff. But you should absolutely have the things in this area on lock, because that's the baseline of what's expected of you to make this game work. But what about all this empty space, right? This is everything else. These are things like bringing snacks, making the game fun for everyone, steering the course of the story, knowing rules that are less directly about your character, moderating disagreements within the party, and building strategies. All these things and more fall into this middle area that I've left uncolored here. Because it's not automatically one person's job to do any of these things. A great many GMs burn out specifically because they run tables where everyone believes that the balance is supposed to look like this, where the expectation is that the GM is fully responsible for whether or not everyone has fun, whether or not everyone makes sensible decisions, where the GM is expected to know all of the rules and to have everyone's sheets memorized and to be able to tell players every single thing that they can do at every moment, and that players only have the responsibility to roll dice when they're told to. This is not really a healthy long-term expectation. Now, it is an occasional expectation, that's fine. I have played games where the balance of responsibility looked like this for a time. Because when you're teaching a group of people a new game, it is inevitable that at least the first couple sessions will end up being very GM heavy on the responsibility scale. But as players get more comfortable, this should shift. Players should take on more responsibility, not only for their own characters, but for the way that they and their characters impact the experience for everyone else at the table. And after a while, players who pay attention will even start to pick up rules that relate to other characters, and they'll start pitching ideas that utilize the strengths of multiple characters. And in doing so, they will start to incorporate other characters into the game, and they will encourage other people to have things to do even when those players aren't sure how to handle a situation. Personally, I aim to have my games look more like this. See, there are things that are clearly on the GM that are on one end of the scale and things that are clearly on the players on the other, but everything in between is kind of a gradient. Some things players do more often than GMs, and some things GMs do more often than players. But there's a lot that we kind of share some role in making work. If you watch episodes of our live streams, you'll see that we often rely on each other. People will jump in and they'll tell each other things that they can do, things that they have ideas about that they can handle for a given situation, and they will even handle disagreements amongst themselves without me having to get involved sometimes. Games where you play may have more solid division of expectations, like that graph I showed where there was a hard line where the red box was full and then stopped. That's fine. But the important thing is that this is communicated and that everyone knows what to expect from one another and what is expected of them. It is also important that these expectations are fair enough that everyone can have fun in the game without burning out or feeling like it's a burden to play with this group. Ultimately, this is the fundamental responsibility of everyone at the table. It is this: use the rules to have fun in such a way that everyone involved can enjoy the time you spend together around the table. Everything else is details, and we will get into those details as the series continues. But that's the essentials. That's the basic expectation. You should have access to the rules, you should know how to use those rules, and you should have fun. But you should not allow that fun to prevent anyone else from having fun. Ideally, you will use the way that you're having fun, and you will use the rules to help other people have fun as well. So this has been kind of the introduction. As I said, I have campaigns going on Start Playing Games. So if you follow that link, you can find times when I am running D&D or Mutants and Masterminds games that are currently recruiting, where I am going to go through all of these things as they are specific to those games. There's also our Twitch channel where you can catch all of our campaigns. And below here is our website where you can find all of our games, all of our links, all of the things that we have going on, and all of our social media and everything like that all in one place. Thank you so much. Leave a comment if you have any specific questions or if you have any feedback on any of this, and I will see you next time. Thank you.